Good morning.
Okay,
Sorry I'm late.
it's okay. Good morning.
We are live.
Good morning. I'm Antoinette Mosley, the Chair of the Housing and Community Development Committee, and I'd like to welcome you to the January 20th, 2026 remote meeting. All council members and staff are participating virtually. For those of you out there with us today, welcome. To help our audience follow along, I'll state each section of the agenda aloud. We are streaming live on our virtual engagement hub, which is accessible through the virtual engagement hub link on the front page of the city website. We also have an option for the public to listen live by phone by calling 855-925-2801 and using meeting code 9791. For those of you out there with us today, welcome. And for today's meeting, we have the option for people to call in and comment live during the meeting. To call in and comment live, use the same number, 855-925-2801, meeting code 9791. Your phone will be muted and you will hear the meeting live. At this point, speakers will need to push *3 to enter the speaker queue. I'll now go through and introduce the committee members and staff who are participating virtually. Council and staff, as I say your name, please say a quick hello. Councilwoman Sage Turner will not be joining us today, but Councilwoman Shanika Smith, please say a quick hello.
Good morning.
Assistant City Manager Ben Woody.
Good morning.
Assistant City Attorney Carly Gillingham.
Good morning.
Planning and Urban Design Director Steph Dahl.
Hello, everyone.
Community Economic Development Director Nikki Reed.
Good morning.
CDBG-DR Program Manager Elma King.
Good morning.
And also joining us today is Sekou Coleman, Legacy Neighborhoods Coalition.
Good morning.
And welcome to all additional staff and participants. We'll now move to the first item on our agenda, which is the approval of minutes from December 16, 2025. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
We'll now have to do a roll call vote. Councilwoman Smith?
Aye.
Myself, aye. The motion passes unanimously. The next item on our agenda is a follow-up to the anti-displacement discussion. Sekou Coleman, Legacy Neighborhoods Coalition, is here to present to us today. I will hand it off to you, Sekou.
Thank you very much, Vice Mayor Mosley. And welcome to others on the call. As stated, my name is Sekou Coleman, and I'm here representing the Legacy Neighborhoods Coalition, which consists of leadership from the neighborhood associations of East End, Emma, Burton Street, Shiloh, and Southside. Next slide, please. I'm going to just read some things and then also add some additional comments. Asheville's legacy neighborhoods hold deep historical, cultural, and economic significance for our city. The city seeks to ensure that these neighborhoods and the people who live in them are empowered to withstand both the social, environmental, and economic changes that our region is experiencing. To this end, city staff are exploring new strategies to keep these communities engaged, informed, and in a prime position to be influential in decision-making that affects them. As you can see, this is from a memo that was sent by Ben Woody to me on December 5th, 2025. Next slide, please. The city is exploring strategies that will offer legacy residents more opportunities to be able to age in place and remain in the neighborhoods where they live. Next slide, please. Legacy neighborhood leaders have indicated a desire to be more connected to the business, community, and future economic opportunities that impact their neighborhoods. Next slide, please. Legacy neighborhood leaders have expressed the importance and value of having open lines of communication between neighborhoods and staff, as well as creating collaborative processes that result in policy implementation that benefits residents of their communities. Next slide, please. So how do we get here? On November 17th, 2025, I participated in a meeting with the mayor, vice mayor, Councilmember Smith, and members of staff, including Ben Woody. And that conversation led to the memo that I just read from, which Ben sent to me on the 5th of December. A few days later at council meeting, I spoke at public comment where I shared 6 recommendations that were informed by Ben's memo. And on the 5th of January this year, I met with Ben and Dawa Hitch and Trey Irby to discuss those recommendations in greater detail and examine next steps. Next slide, please. So what are those recommendations? Legacy neighborhood preservation districts, legacy neighborhood CDBG and capital prioritization, displacement impact review for major projects and rezonings, LNC named as a required engagement partner, stronger notifications and simplicity alerts, and legacy public art and history tied to capital projects. So let's dig in a little bit deeper. Next slide, please. Preservation districts. We're talking about place-based standards to prevent displacement and protect community character as zoning changes move forward. So when I met with Ben and Trey and Dawa, we talked about how it's really important to define the boundaries. We've got boundaries that are defined by neighborhood associations, and in some communities, particularly those that are experiencing gentrification and growth, you'll have neighborhood associations that have carved out specific regions in a much larger historic boundary. And so if we are only looking at the boundaries as defined by certain neighborhood associations, we're not always going to capture the true shape of the neighborhood's historic boundaries. That can only be done in communication with the residents, the legacy neighborhoods, the folks who've lived there for generations. So figuring out how to work around defining those boundaries and making that clear was one piece. And we also talked about how to use data to support defensible standards and boundaries. So looking at GIS and permits and land use trends and census reports to help get a more informed picture of how the neighborhoods are looking. Yes.
So this one is interesting to me, and I want to make sure I'm kind of understanding what you're saying. So, can you give me an example of where a neighborhood description or definition differs from the legacy understanding of what that neighborhood was?
Yes. Yes, absolutely, and I appreciate you asking that question. So I'll lift up the community of Southside. Historically, when you look at Southside, especially in the time in which it really grew to prominence, it was not recognized by the city in a formal sense at all. It was a community where many of the workers lived and created space for themselves. And so through urban renewal, a lot of those roads and spaces were carved up and changed. And then you've got a situation where within those neighborhoods, as new folks come from out of town and we drive, we see an increase in gentrification in those communities. You'll find that the folks that are moving into the neighborhoods are creating boundaries and neighborhood associations to protect where they are. So within the initial historic boundaries of Southside, that was always seen as essentially from Hilliard Avenue all the way down to the river, and from sort of like from Biltmore, and then Southside Avenue, which no longer exists the full length of what it used to be. And then down to Depot Street and to the river and so forth. And so now what you've got is the South French Broad Neighborhood Association represents a portion of that from Hilliard just down South French Broad and kind of over to Choctaw and in some spaces there. You've got Wecan, the West End Klingman area neighborhood, which has a portion of the area around Klingman area down to the river. And then you've got, which is not necessarily residential, well, I guess it's mixed use. You've got within the River Arts District, That's an area where specifically there was a lot of Black homes and Black businesses. And then there's also the South Slope space, which is in an area that includes like Ashland Avenue, which was a large part of homes, and there were many businesses in spaces in and along Cox Avenue, and also along the banks and in that area or what have you. And so what's happening now is longtime residents of Southside won't necessarily see their history reflected collectively in the boundaries that are defined, because some of those spaces are being claimed or utilized, if you will, by other neighborhood associations. And so when the Southside United Neighborhood Association started, although it's got representation of folks who live all throughout historic Southside, when we had to define the boundaries, we could not claim spaces where South Slope was already claimed. We could not claim spaces that were part of the River Arts District or part of South French Broad. So the neighborhood, as defined by the Southside United Neighborhood Association, is a much smaller place, but the community sees the larger footprint as the collective community and wants to see these benefits reflected in the entire community. And so that's where the challenge was in some spaces, because the legacy engagement is not reflective of the full
Okay.
community.
So what I hear you're saying, and I'll let you move on because I don't want to belabor, essentially your ideal preservation district would include what, well, I still think of it as Cox Avenue, but I think some folks call it South Slope and River Arts District. So essentially South Slope is in South Side
Exactly.
and River Arts District is in South Side.
Exactly.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Next slide, please. CDBG and capital prioritization. So we're talking about directing HUD and local capital dollars towards stabilization and infrastructure in legacy neighborhoods. And so, many of these things, these packages, these programs already exist. We're talking about CDBG, not the DR. And the reality is that for legacy residents, legacy neighborhoods that may want to take advantage of them, the struggle to comply with federal requirements can be, a major issue. And so being able to support the capacity, if we really want to be able to use these CDBG vehicles as an opportunity to revitalize and stabilize the infrastructure in the neighborhoods, we want to make sure that we're providing the level of support for the folks there to take advantage of those things. And so that looks like, rubrics, and navigators. And so when we talk about rubrics, that's a way to bake into the evaluation process the degree to which the project is actually serving the goals of stabilizing the infrastructure and those sorts of things. The navigator piece is providing support from the city side to legacy neighborhood applicants to ensure that they understand the process, they're able to get the applications in, they're aware of things like many groups don't realize that these are reimbursable projects, which requires you to have the funds up front to spend and then get reimbursed. And that's not always something that works for a lot of these organizations that are cash strapped. So just being aware of that ahead of time can allow them to plan appropriately. And so that is what was discussed with staff for this one. Next slide, please. Displacement impact review. So here we're talking about assessing and disclosing displacement risk before major public projects and rezonings. We're talking about embedding it into the internal workflow so it's a standard practice, and sort of creating an output that is visible to staff, applicants, LNC, and council. This is not necessarily intended as as something that would stop a particular process, as I understand, there are legal concerns around that. What it is designed to do is make folks aware all around just by being very transparent of what are the projected risks, what's the projected impact of this project. And so what we discussed is how to put that as part of standard city practice so that it becomes just how things are done around here. Yes.
Sorry. So I remember you were speaking about this before and you had a name for it, which I thought was great. And now I can't remember. What?
Yeah. I think the index or something, displacement
Okay.
index. Yeah, displacement score, something like that.
So what does that look like, Sekou? Is that on a scale of 1 to 10, this project will be a 9, where 10 is, and then how does that come to be? Like how it's scored?
Yeah, good question. So I'm envisioning something that provides kind of like a dashboard of data, and this would be something that essentially looks at the proposed project and then uses a variety of factors that are documented, peer-reviewed, scientific, not just coming up with something out of the sky, but there are all sorts of tools that are available to do projections. There are all sorts of resources. I know that these things do exist. I'm not fully aware of everything, and we talked in our meeting about taking advantage of what we could to look for more. But what it would be is, for example, this is what the impact of this project is going to be on transportation. This is what the impact is going to be on costs of property taxes, sort of projecting what the increase might be. This is what might be in terms of the space of the land that's lost, and then looking at the various factors that are related to social and cultural displacement, as well as physical displacement, looking at economic priorities that neighborhoods themselves may have defined, and figuring out that based on some sort of scale, yes, of a not at all to all the way, this is where this project is projected to have an impact, and this is what this impact looks like. So that you would have essentially like a summary of to be able to look, and overall a score, a higher score would suggest, for example, a greater risk of displacement.
And so this would be an analysis that would take place not just on projects near or in these preservation districts that you're talking about, but everything
That is
as
correct.
a displacement impact review. Okay, thanks.
Yes, citywide, yes.
Mhm.
Okay. Next slide, please. And so in this one, we're talking about LNC as a required engagement partner. We're talking about formalizing engagement for decisions that affect legacy neighborhoods, specifically planning, zoning, housing policy, capital projects. And when we had this conversation, staff lifted up the need to distinguish between parcel-based activity and citywide policy actions, because they happen in different ways. But we did realize and agree that engagement is stronger when the triggers and expectations are defined in advance. So what this is now, I'm sorry, what this reflects in some ways is moving differently from the way that the city moved during urban renewal. So I referenced that earlier in regards to Southside. The urban renewal program, as you recall, is a federally funded program, similar to the way that the CDBG program operates. Cities had to apply to the feds for funding and put together a project and so forth. In the process of doing that, there was very little engagement, communication, consultation with the residents of the communities whose futures were being decided and planned for. And so this is a way to sort of standardize and systemically change that process, so that it's much harder for projects to move forward without legacy neighborhoods knowing what the impact is going to be and having an opportunity to be engaged in the conversation early in the process, as opposed to at the end of the process when the shovels are getting ready to go into the ground. So that's what this one was about. Next slide, please. Notifications and simplicity alerts. So this ties into just making sure that residents receive early, usable information about proposals and how to engage. And so we discussed that this was a two-stage approach, having an early notice at submission. So the minute that somebody puts in an application, right, regardless of whether it's a citizen resident piece or whether it's done in the city, somebody somewhere initiates some sort of application to start the process. So at that point, based on specific flags or triggers or whatever, there should be the ability to create a notification early stage. And then a little bit later on, after staff have their review, generate a plain language summary that is then also shared. We talked that simplicity doesn't necessarily cover everything today, but improvements are being explored. And we talked about how plain language summaries could be supported by AI, especially if done carefully and consistently. And so that was an exciting part of the conversation around just being innovative and ahead of the curve with dealing with some of these things. Next slide, please. Legacy, public art, and history. So this is really about tying capital projects to public art and history commitments so that rebuilding does not erase legacy. We talked about how past efforts show the importance of centering local artists and legacy leadership. I know that the planning staff over the last several years has worked with various projects in and around legacy neighborhoods, specifically around sort of culture and development and so forth, and just really making sure that residents of the communities are fully engaged as opposed to consultants and folks from out of town who don't have the same kind of connection. Also realizing it's important to build a consistent approach that's tied to capital planning and not ad hoc decisions. And then even exploring potential alignment with the African American Heritage Commission, which to my understanding is in a space where its future can be explored, examined, revitalized, however that may look. So that's what that piece was about. Next slide, please. So we reached shared alignment on the fact that these 6 priority areas work best as an ecosystem, not sort of one of standalone things. So we're talking about zoning standards and targeted investments, displacement review, notifications, engagement requirements, and like stewarding the legacies. The near-term goal is to get clarity on priorities and outcomes so that staff is aligned and productive. Next slide, please. So city staff are looking for clarity from LNC on priorities, definitions, desired outcomes, and what needs to be regulated, protected, prioritized, and communicated. And LNC has already been in the process of planning a weekend retreat that's going to take place at the end of this month. And that will be a space to begin to provide the responses and start with that information. Next slide, please. So the work items we discussed, city staff is going to support with the data, GIS permits, land use trends, census, and so forth to help inform the boundaries and work with us in that regard. Ben's going to review notification triggers and current workflows, starting with parcel-based triggers and what it would take to improve legacy neighborhood targeting. Dawo is going to take shape to shape a proactive distribution approach that's useful, accountable, and not overwhelming. We want people to get the information, but we don't want to bombard them with information so they become desensitized to it. We want the group to, as a group, we're going to explore, this is really good, standard operating procedure versus policy. Because in some of these things, we can get early wins by just looking at the way the city does business and making shifts here or there to accomplish these goals, as opposed to having to deal with something that has to come before council and be voted on and deal with all these other sorts of things. So it allows for practical early wins and also the opportunity to look for longer term levers and things that we're going to work in. And we plan to have our next check-in in early February to come back and see where things are and what next steps look like. Next slide, please.
Check in with staff or check in with LNC?
With staff. So check in with staff after the LNC retreat that will have a more sort of the next movement beyond the meeting that we had in January, early January.
And if possible, Ben, I wouldn't mind being in on that meeting in early February if possible. Thanks.
So I'm not at any way dictating what members of HCD should do in terms of discussion, but here are a few suggestions to consider in your conversations about this. So, what outcomes would you like to see? Could you expect to see improve in legacy neighborhoods over the next year or two? In talking about standards around early notification, what would be the minimum standard, and how would plain language summaries, work? What level of displacement risk transparency should be standard before major rezonings and public projects? Where should HUD and capital dollars be prioritized to support stabilization and aging in place? Next slide, please. So I started this presentation with a quote from a member of city staff, and I want to end it with a quote from a member of city staff a little over 100 years ago. John Nolan was Asheville's very first city planner. And the quote on the screen reflects the sentiment at the time around how these neighborhoods should be planned for or planned about. And the result of this attitude and this energy is evident today in the legacy of urban renewal and in the lived experience of residents who are trying to repair from these harms. So I offer the information in this presentation as an opportunity for Asheville to choose a different legacy for the next 100 years, to intentionally work to plan with the neighborhoods and then follow through on it. Next slide, please. So we started off talking about how legacy neighborhoods have these concerns, but the reality is the outcomes benefit the entire city. Clearer standards, earlier engagement, and fewer avoidable conflicts. Better notifications and plan language information is going to strengthen transparency and public trust. Displacement risk visibility improves decision quality before major votes and improvement and investments. Smarter use of HUD and capital dollars protects public investment and supports stable neighborhoods. And aging in place outcomes reduce housing instability pressures across the entire system. That's it. Last slide. Sekou, thank you all for the opportunity to share this information. I'm happy to answer any questions, and I look forward to working with the city to plan a new future for a livable and equitable Asheville.
Thank you, Sekou. Any questions? Shanika,
This
any-
was so good, and Happy New Year to you, Sekou.
Thank you. Thank you. Same to you.
I had some questions about defining boundaries, and you mentioned some neighborhood associations who had claimed space. I was wondering if you all can include some of those association leaders in your retreat, because I think the power of this entire approach would be to define boundaries, and if that entails some buy-in from South Slope, RAD, and South Rich Broad Neighborhood Association, it will be helpful to greater planning decisions and information. So I just wanted to know, has there been any engagement with those groups?
Good question. And short answer is yes. And the engagement for those groups is largely through the Southside United Neighborhood Association. And so through the process of the neighborhood association being established, there have been conversations over the years with leadership from South French Broad. We've had visits and representation from members of WeCan and South Slope and the River Arts District. And we've even had conversations with members of the city staff. This is pre-storm with Christina and Trey around what it looks like to have a sort of collective engagement process for Southside, that like a unified Southside that reflects the issues and wishes of all folks in that community, in that space, and brings them into the legacy and the history. Right, many people have moved into some spaces not knowing that the history was there because it's been erased. So this is an opportunity for them to learn and to be welcomed into this historic space and to work more collectively for that. In regards to engagement for the retreat, I don't know that piece, timing wise, would work. However, yes, there is the opportunity, there's the ongoing opportunity as this plays out, because as I mentioned, these are solutions and options that are going to benefit all of Asheville. The legacy neighborhoods want to see them specifically in their spaces, but they're not going to just be of benefit to legacy neighborhoods as well.
And you mentioned early notification as a helpful tool to get out in front of issues or just to inform legacy neighborhoods. I wondered if you had any ideas of what would trigger a notification.
Well, I think what we talked about was there would be an automatic trigger at the point that whatever process, the sort of um, logical operational starting point of a project process, whatever that is. If it's something, for example, that's a developer or a resident is going to be leading and they go through the city's portal or whatever to submit the application, then the minute that that application is, they hit the submit button, an alert is automatically fired off. What that looks like, is to be mapped out, but an alert is automatically fired out. And then the application comes in as it normally would. And it's my understanding that staff review it and then make a recommendation or whatever to HCD or to council or planning and zoning or whatever it may need to be. So after it's had a staff review, and when it comes up for that sort of presentation to council, that is when there's a plain language summary that's generated. And that's where we were also saying that AI tools could be used to generate the summary so that staff time does not need to be used to craft. It could just be pulled from minutes or notes or whatever to reflect what's in there. And then that's the information that's sent out through channels that legacy neighborhoods and citizens and others would be able to access. Very well could be simplicity, the existing system, just figuring out how to enhance it as necessary to do that. And that was what part of the conversation on January 5th was about.
The reason why I asked that question concerning boundaries and mapping, if the planned activity is outside of the boundaries, then it might not trigger a notification. Nevertheless, the impact from that activity might, affect legacy neighborhoods. So I was just wondering if there are different degrees to these triggers as well.
That's one of the things that we're discussing and examining and figuring out exactly what that looks like.
Because what I was thinking in that regard, Shanika, was maybe the notifications go for changes that would be citywide and changes that would be within the boundaries of, well, whatever boundaries are set for the preservation districts. Maybe that's it. So maybe a development somewhere not tied into the preservation district would not trigger, but a citywide change would, maybe.
And that's where when we talked about using data to help inform, that's where we can look at what's happened in the past and map that to what the experience has been since, and figure out how the process might be able to be shifted or adapted accordingly to make it work. Hey, Ben.
And that was a good question, Councilwoman Smith. And I don't know the answer to this, but it's also conceivable that all these boundaries could be different, and that adds complexity. But you could have a certain type of boundary that you use for a notification tool. We may find that the neighborhood's boundary may not be the same as like an overlay boundary, for example. So there is complexity in it, but as we get into this and look at data and kind of what we want to accomplish, there may be variability in these boundaries for different purposes. So I don't know the answer to all that yet, but those are kind of the process we'll have to go through as we have these conversations.
And so as we're wrapping up, I'm assuming we're getting ready to wrap up. I want to thank you, Sekou. I was especially glad to see your last slide where you said making Asheville livable for all, because when I look at the different actions, maybe with the exception of the preservation districts, and the displacement impact review, we essentially get the same kind of questions regardless of the neighborhood when potential development is going through. We often hear, no one spoke to us. This is what we're thinking. Why didn't you let us know beforehand? So maybe if we get these action items underway, it benefits the full city. So I want to thank you once again for coming. This has been great.
Absolutely. And I would just say one final thing
And yeah,
is that yes, in regards to the displacement being of high interest at this time to legacy neighborhoods. However, let's not forget how the conditions and the experience that is happening in some of these legacy neighborhoods is the canary in the coal mine. When we're talking about displacement, we're talking about what does it mean when people can no longer afford to live in the neighborhood and community where they work. That's not just happening in legacy neighborhoods. And so I think when we start to expand our conversation around displacement, the benefit and the impact is something that the entire city could see. Councilman Smith, yes.
Yeah, as an artsy person that lives in a Black body, I often see public art and the recognition of culture through arts as a trade-off, and not in the spirit of preservation or stabilization of our neighborhood. So I just wanted to put that in the room because often we don't get what we need to stabilize our communities and actually pay homage. We often get the representation of through arts by way of a gentrification avenue, and it's just that you know that mention or just a reflection of what was, and not a true definition of being preserved and stabilized.
I appreciate you lifting that up. Thank you for sharing.
Well, thank you so much, Sekou. This was really, really helpful. I look forward to hearing about the retreat and hopefully getting together again in February.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you to everyone present on the call, and I look forward to many more fruitful discussions down the line. Please reach out if you got any questions about anything I shared today.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Bye.
And now we'll move to the third item on our agenda, which is ADU regulation for non-conforming structures. And here to present to us is Steph Dahl, Planning and Urban Design Director. Steph.
Good morning, Chair of the Housing and Community Development Committee, and Ms. Shanika. I appreciate you giving us time today to have a conversation in advance of an item that is slated to be heard at City Council at the January 27th regular meeting. Next slide. I'll preface this by saying that that was a really good lead-in, and I appreciate that discussion. It ties into this topic very well. In this presentation, we are going to be talking about a zoning text amendment to our Unified Development Ordinance. We'll talk quickly about the purpose of the amendment, and then we'll get into what we've heard from the community, what we heard from the Planning and Zoning Commission. And what we're really asking you today is this item ready to be seen at full council on the 27th? And what additional information do you think that staff needs to prepare in order for council to make a decision on that or a later date? Next slide. Just a pause here to say that big picture, Sekou was noting that we do have an affordability issue. We have a displacement issue, both for residents of our legacy neighborhoods, but also for many other people in the community. And I'm grateful for all the work. I know all the rest of staff is too, that council has authorized in the past years for us to be able to analyze and identify the extent of this issue, which at this point, nationally and of course locally, maybe more so in Asheville than anywhere else in North Carolina, we do have a severe affordable housing crisis. A growing number of people whose incomes in this area do not provide them with enough money to be able to afford the type of housing that exists here, in addition to us just needing supply. So the purpose of this amendment is to remove the requirement that owners of non-conforming structures, and I'm going to talk about what that means, and residential areas must actually go and seek a variance from the city's Board of Adjustment, which is a quasi-judicial advisory board, in order to turn their garage, shed, or carriage house into an accessory dwelling unit. This change would actually do. It would also clear up any unclear or erroneous language that's in our much band-aided UDO associated with the UDO ordinance right now. Just some housekeeping. On a larger level, this is really talking about continuing to implement the city's plans and our study findings. So this is everything from the comprehensive plan to the missing middle study, our affordable housing plan. And of course, achieve these following benefits. ADUs across the country have been seen as one of the gentlest ways for us to do small scale, low impact infill in our neighborhoods, promote affordability. These units tend to be smaller, which tends to mean that these units are going to be more affordable. Some of these units are built by just renovating existing structures. The ones that we're talking about today, we're only talking about people who are seeking to renovate existing structures. It supports aging in place. These are the perfect types of places for people who are wanting to be able to have a smaller place, a place that's all on one level, a place that doesn't have so many bedrooms anymore because their children have moved out in the world, or people who want to move from maybe not into their backyard, but into one of their children's backyards to age in place. Lastly, it's this amendment would really improve the use of city and staff and volunteer resources. It's important to note that going to the Board of Adjustment, lining up those cases, these are legal cases. It's a quasi-judicial proceeding. It's much more involved than a regular advisory board meeting. Setting that up, requiring people to pay money to be heard when ADUs are generally legal and have been legal in the city of Asheville for many years. It's really adding an extra layer of bureaucracy and cost. It means that all of the members of the volunteer Board of Adjustment need to take time out of their day and process these. And most of the time, to not bury the lead, if not all of the time, the Board of Adjustment does find that these people have a hardship that they did not contribute to, and they are granted their variance. So let's dig in. Let's go to the next slide. A brief reminder that an accessory dwelling unit is a smaller residential dwelling unit located on the same lot as an existing single family homes. There's lots of different names for them. Granny flats are the ones that I grew up with or understand. And you can make an ADU out of part of an existing home. It can be like you renovated your attic or your walkout basement. You can have an addition that's a new ADU. And you can convert standalone accessory structures. And again, that's what we're really talking about today. So next slide. I want to explain for anybody that's watching what a nonconformity is and why people end up in this situation in the first place. obviously laws change and the regulations for how you build structures change with it. So it's very likely that if your home was built before the let's just say the late 1990s, that you have a non-conforming structure, whether that's one of your accessory buildings or your actual house. 37% of all structures in the city of Asheville, almost half of residential structures are non-conforming. And it just means that we might have a requirement, for instance, that you set back your building, say, 10 or 15 feet from the side property line. And when your building was built, it was only set back 8 feet. So your building now fails to conform to the current requirements in that zoning district, and you own a non-conforming structure. It doesn't mean you can't live in it. It doesn't mean it's unsafe. It just means it doesn't conform to our current regulations that we base all of our other new regulations on. So next slide. Here's just an example. Someone has a primary home on a structure. You can see there's an we're talking about accessory structures you might want to renovate. They have an accessory structure that's closer to the line, but it's still near their own driveway, what have you. And if they wanted to convert this into a granny flat, they would have to pay the cost to go to the Board of Adjustment and get them to okay it. Next slide. And to be really clear, if you have a garage or shed and it does meet our current setback lines, no matter what district you're in for residential, it is legal right now. These are not it's not an illegal use. So we went out to the community and had some conversations about ADUs, not just last year, but in earlier discussions when we first brought this up with the Planning and Zoning Commission in 2024. That was a part of a bigger batch of proposed amendments. And this is really what we heard. People continue to be concerned about short-term vacation rentals, and we understand that. And what's helpful is that we're able to educate them about the city's existing regulations. We have strong regulation against turning most structures into short-term vacation rentals. We have the whole homestay ordinance, and we do have enforcement when people have concerns about that. So people were concerned about communicating around the impacts. So meaning like, what about displacement? The things that we just heard about could be one of those potential impacts. Will do people feel like this is happening in their neighborhood or not happening in their neighborhood? And I've got some data for you that I'll share in just a minute about which neighborhoods this is happening in. So being able to like report out on that data so people have a better understanding is important. And we have some processes that we're considering to be more clear about that. Parking questions. This is a concern for neighborhoods, no matter what the type of development. So we hear this with all new residential development. And then folks are hoping to hear more about how the city could help every neighborhood understand what development issues and policies might be coming down the pipe. And then the last one, real estate market pressures, is a little bit more about, it's connected to that concern about impact. There is a concern that private sector investment, like predatory investors may look to older neighborhoods as now a potential new investment area, and see older homes as an easy way to be able to make money. Next slide.
That point's not clear to me.
So I think this is something I'll just share that the city doesn't have a lot of mechanisms to encourage or discourage private residential investment in certain ways. Can you help me understand when you say that it's not clear? What
Sure.
what would be the question that you have?
Okay, so because I've heard it a couple of times, it's something along the lines of, it sounds like people are assuming folks who happen to have homes, or some folks who might have homes in older neighborhoods, might not realize um, the gold mine they're sitting on. I'm just making that up. And if we make this change, an investor from the outside would recognize, oh, this this unit that you have on your property, which isn't in compliance with the setback requirement, I can buy your property now based on this change and create two properties on one property, therefore leading to like a boon of some sort. Is that the argument? Did that question even make sense? What's the
So
what?
I can't speak for the neighborhoods, but that's basically what we heard. I think that's what the argument is. And I think the reality for real estate market is that if you're an investor and you're looking to make a profit, and you do this as a business, the city's requirement that you now go and get a variance is probably not a barrier to you, because if you're a developer, you probably already have a lawyer and know how to do a quasi judicial process. If you're a developer, the cost of applying for this variance, which is about $500, I believe right now, is not prohibitive. And what we're saying is we actually want to reduce the barrier for people who already own these homes. It's way more likely that a person who has general carpentry skills could easily renovate an existing structure than, and let's just say they don't have a lot of access to capital. So they might not be interested in building a brand new ADU, which might cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. But the only, like, a barrier to them might be facing the quasi judicial process and having to spend that extra time and money. So,
Gotcha. Okay.
okay.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to talk now about when we took this most current recommendation through and got this community input, we also always take it to Planning and Zoning Commission and get a recommendation from them. So from the action minutes of the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting last fall, during the creation of a motion, Commissioner Jared Wheatley proposed an amendment to the motion to, quote, exclude parcels identified in Appendix 7F, which are parcels in the legacy neighborhoods and other areas identified using data as being more vulnerable to displacement. So that motion for council to adopt this text amendment, added this use of Appendix 7F. What they noted was, what was noted in the discussion was that council had in prior years committed to pausing any UDO modification in these areas. And so since we were going through with a recommended UDO modification, it could only, they recommend that it only be done so with that add-on. So why we're discussing this in detail is really two reasons. The first one is the legacy neighborhoods actually wrote a letter and provided public comment about this issue and did not oppose this potential zoning text amendment, but brought up instead clear concerns that they had that are now being explored through the memo you just heard about. So they were things around having clear data to talk about neighborhood boundaries, understanding and having staff sit down and communicate what the potential impact of these types of amendments might be, to monitor and report out, providing that level of data. So all of those items in the council staff report that we've created are noted for council to look at. In this case, our legal department has noted that um, providing it's one thing to adopt this 7F appendix, and I'm going to talk about what that is in just a second, for a regular zoning text amendment. Like that is maybe not the best way for us to adopt policy as a city, but it may be legally defensible. However, in this case, since we are talking about providing a different path for administrative relief in a legal process to some homeowners, but excluding a whole set of other homeowners from the benefit of that simpler path, this would be a legally risky move for council to adopt this text amendment using the 7F appendix. So let's go to the next slide. Appendix 7F was adopted last March, and it is a list of 2,000 or so parcels that, when added to another ordinance, are basically left out, exempted, or carved out from any new changes. The regulations for that area would remain the same. And the intention of using Appendix 7F from council's perspective was to protect the more vulnerable communities, vulnerable to change and displacement, from any potential negative impacts due to perceived rapid changes from zoning updates. In practice, our planning and urban design staff, after doing review, have said that its use and effectiveness are questionable, and we want to make sure that council understands this analysis. We are poised and ready to work with the community on new options that are effective, that do align with not only best practices and anti-displacement, but the needs and desires of our specific communities. So I'm going to go over 4 things about 7F that detail out why it is not a best practice and why staff strongly recommends that you do not use 7F if you consider adopting this ordinance. The first one of that is that there is a big loophole in the use of this appendix. So it is just a list of parcels, and that means that its applicability to any parcel is impermanent, because if a property owner subdivides a lot at any time, that property will get new parcel numbers and it will no longer be a part of Appendix 7F. And to be clear, especially if you have a larger property in one of these 7F areas, it is easy for you to use that loophole. And we have had people ask about it. The second issue is that it is a little bit confusing to administer, both from a property owner perspective and, of course, from a staff perspective. But that's our job, and we can take care of confusing regulations right now. The administrative piece of it is that it really complicates people's understanding of what zoning district they're in and a reflection of what they're actually allowed to develop. So when you go to, because it is an appendix of parcel numbers, right now, every time someone calls and asks what they're able to do in their district, you have to see if their parcel is in, they have to see, and that's an onus on a property owner. Where am I included? Am I in a 7F or am I not in 7F? Next slide. There's also a paradox around using the word protection that we would like to explore with the communities. So, quote, protecting these areas by limiting development rights. It definitely will help some vulnerable homeowners who might be concerned, for instance, with what will happen to their neighborhood if we now allow multifamily, or in this case, an ADU of a non-conforming structure, renovation of a non-conforming structure. Will it change the fabric of their neighborhood? Will it increase gentrification pressures, et cetera? but there's no doubt that that this is ambivalent, that also actively suppresses generational wealth building by telling the property owners of those areas that their property is much more limited in utility than anyone else's. They are not allowed to do the same thing that other people are allowed to do in the most simplest terms of residential development. And in this case, when we're talking about, converting a backyard garage into a residential unit for your mother, let's just say that you are not allowed to do that without paying an extra cost and being delayed by several months by going to seek a variance from the Board of Adjustment. The last reason why we are strongly recommending against adopting this ordinance using Appendix 7F is that legal concern that I just mentioned, that there is risk, there is a higher risk associated with this type of an amendment because it's connected to a judicial process. So let's go to the next slide. I just wanted to note that I mentioned in the beginning of this presentation that we would provide some information about where this is happening. And so we are working on updating some maps but I think I can just relay some things verbally for now, and we will bring them to City Council because the findings right now are pretty clear. So basically there's been 333 at last count accessory dwelling units overall that have been permitted by the city of Asheville since we adopted these ordinances. And these are both new ones and conversions. So 333 units that people were able to do in their backyard or by using their existing structures. And less than 25% right now, like 23, 24% of those have happened in the 7F neighborhoods. So additionally, of the 17 cases, we've heard 17 cases in the past 2 years at the Board of Adjustment, which is a large percentage, about half of what we're hearing at the Board of Adjustment. Half of the reason why the Board of Adjustment has to get together to review cases is because of these non-conforming structure irregularity that says it's not legal for you to do it and you have to get a variance. So we've heard 17 cases in the last 2 years. Only 2 of those were in the 7F areas. In general, they're mostly spread out fairly equally amongst other neighborhoods. And of the 2 that occurred in the 7F neighborhoods, just so you know, one was in Oakley and the other was in Emma. And those are both existing structures. So we're here. I've got folks online that can help us with additional data and questions. I'm here for questions. And as I noted, what we're looking for today is an answer to whether or not you think that this is ready for council to see fully on the 27th of January. And then also any notes on additional information that you think would be helpful for staff to bring if and when we bring this to full council. Thank you.
Shanika, do you have anything?
Okay. I don't have anything. I think
Okay.
from my perspective, I think it's ready for the 22nd.
I do too. And I do want to note that I haven't heard pushback from legacy neighborhoods on this particular one. I'll just go ahead and say that I'm not a fan of 7F for a couple of reasons and didn't vote in favor of it for a couple of those reasons. One of those is in Sekou earlier presentation, we noted how sometimes there are neighborhood maps and then broader historical understanding of what a neighborhood is. And I don't believe, although probably well-intentioned, 7F includes that broader understanding that the legacy neighborhoods we're looking for. I don't have a problem with this. I was looking through the papers and I didn't see a suggested motion. Are you asking us to make a motion to bring it to the full body, or are you just going to bring it to the full body in the next meeting?
I think accepting you saying that it's not ready, we have it on the 27th agenda, and you would not have to officially vote to move it forward at this time.
Okay, well, I'm assuming then it's going to be on the next agenda.
Okay,
Okay,
thank you.
thank you. And then with that, we'll move to the next item on the agenda, which is item number 4, CDBG-DR Housing Programs Update. And here to present is Nikki Reed. Nikki?
Good morning. Thank you so much. Yes, and I am here in partnership with Elma King. She is overseeing our CDBG-DR programs. And this presentation is highlighting our CDBG-DR, but we also have a touchback to a program that we initiated post-Helene for home repair with Archer. So with that, I'm going to let Elma take the lead on the presentation, but I am also here if there are any questions concerning those activities as well. And I believe Sasha's on the call too, because we are all kind of co-leading this together. So Elma, if you'll get us started, we'll be on hand for questions.
Thank you, Nikki. Good morning, council members. Can we go to the next slide, please, Katie? Thank you. So just as a recap of our CDBG-DR housing programs, they equal a total of 31 million. And of that, the current allocation has 28 million in the multifamily category and 3 million in the single family category. In December, staff approached the Housing Recovery Board and HCD committee to consider an amendment to reallocate 17 million in funds from the multifamily to the single family program for a total single family program allocation of 20 million. But feedback from these entities led us to pursue a 3-pronged approach to explore all available avenues and get more information and data before proceeding. So firstly, the City of Asheville and the North Carolina Department of Commerce have signed the subrecipient agreement to activate the $3 million in CDBG-DR funds for Renew NC's single-family home repair and reconstruction program, and that includes a data sharing component. Next, based on the need for home repair, the city's amending a contract with the Archer Coalition for an additional $715,000 in city bond funds to perform storm-related home repair in Asheville. And finally, to assess the multifamily pipeline, the first notice of funding opportunity for the CDBG-DR Affordable Multifamily Housing Construction Program will be released tomorrow, January 21st, for $10 million. These actions advance Council's housing recovery priorities while retaining strategic flexibility to make data-informed decisions regarding the remaining DR programs balance, housing programs balance of 18 million. So that 31 million minus the 3 million allocated for the single family home repair program and 10 million allocated to the first NOFO, remaining with 18 million remaining. With that, I'll get into some of the details about these 3 elements. Oh, sorry, I'm not controlling. Katie, can you mind? Thank you. For the single family home repair program, you can see here the latest data as of the 14th. We do get data nightly, but this screenshot reflects data as of the 14th. And this reflects that we have received in Asheville city limits 264 applications to date. And of that 264, there are 188 active applications. Of those, 94 are in review and 94 are considered eligible, leaving 76 inactive applications, either ineligible or inactive. Of the 94 applications considered eligible, 66 of those are in that phase 1, which is the 60% AMI or less. And then of those 66, 47 of them are considered priority 1, having either a disabled resident, a child, or an elderly resident in the home.
Can you repeat that number? It's
There
66 are below. What's below 60% AMI and what's
currently 66 below AMI, 60% AMI. So 66 applications below 60% AMI. And then of the 66, there are 47 that have a further prioritization based on either having an elderly person, disabled resident, or child in the home. You can see
And-
that in that box to the right on the bottom. Sorry, yes,
Okay,
Vice Mayor?
yeah, I'm just trying to, and so the total active applications, 188.
Mm-hmm.
S- Um, okay, so I'm trying to figure, so the majority of the applications are for folks who earn more than 60% AMI?
Well, there are still in review. So there are that 188 total, 94 of them are in review and 94 considered eligible. So then we're still doing, the state is still doing the eligibility reviews for the 94 in review.
Okay,
Um,
I got
so
you.
then, yeah, so then breaking down that 94 further, you can see that 66 of them are in that phase one, which is 60% AMI or less.
Got
And
you.
I just, great questions. And I do want to emphasize that the state and the city are not moving to other phases, so higher AMIs, until that phase one need is met of the 60% AMI or below. And I know there's a lot of data there. That's kind of why I walked through how this works, so that anytime this report is shown, it's kind of clear, the breakdown. We'll keep going, Katie. We received questions from the Housing Recovery Board and from HCD, and we'll attempt to respond to those questions here. So in terms of the thresholds for the reconstructions and rehabilitations, the Renew NC original caps were $50,000 for rehabilitation and $375,000 for reconstruction. In November, the reconstruction threshold changed from 375,000 to 450,000. And the city adopted a substantial amendment to our action plan to match this new threshold with what the state was pursuing. Concerns were raised across the city, across the state, frankly, regarding the rehabilitation threshold being too low, though, resulting in more homes being categorized as more costly reconstructions rather than as rehabilitations. So the state has responded by increasing the program's rehabilitation cap from 50,000 to 100,000 with a case-by-case review for properties with repair needs between 75,000 and 100,000. The case-by-case review would look at things such as environmental mitigation, any structural deficiencies, plumbing or electrical replacements. And the hope is to limit any potential change orders during construction. Next slide, please, Katie. I can't think. Thank you. We were asked what kind of information we have on the currently inactive Renew NC applications. As mentioned a couple slides ago, there are currently 76 inactive Renew NC applications in Asheville. The signed subrecipient agreement with the North Carolina Department of Commerce will allow the city additional information on the reasons for inactive applications. And there were concerns raised by the city that applicants might be withdrawing from the process due to the inability to fund temporary housing. In inquiring further on this with the state, they've indicated that no applicants have withdrawn for this reasoning as of January 2026, and they're closely monitoring these needs, and that the state is working with many partners, including the American Red Cross, the Governor's Recovery Office for Western North Carolina, and long-term recovery groups to support temporary relocation gaps. We were asked what other experiences other municipalities and counties have had with Renew NC. The state has reported 9 projects completed in the region and 9 additional under construction. There's additional information on the Commerce website, the state's Commerce website on this, and 2 in particular that stood out to me were in Black Mountain and in Henderson County that were recently completed within the last month. Next slide, please, Katie. Another question we received is what happens when a specific project exceeds the $450,000 threshold? The program will indeed fund up to $450,000 in reconstruction costs, and then anything beyond this will have to be covered using alternative funding sources, and award cap exceptions would be considered on a case-by-case basis by the Renew NC program. We've gotten questions and we've asked questions concerning displacement and how it's being addressed by the Renew NC program. A 3-year residence requirement mitigates against immediate displacement, and the state's financing of 1 year of flood insurance premiums provides immediate relief, in addition to specialized housing counseling being offered to prepare for and manage potential property tax increases. And just want to mention too that all program activities must adhere to a relocation assistance and residential anti-displacement plan. We received questions about what funding options there might be for funding the gap. And to address this question, our first step is to analyze all of the available data. The signed subrecipient agreement with the North Carolina Department of Commerce will provide the city with expanded access to state Renew NC data, helping us to assess the true extent of the need. Next slide, please. We received questions about why the city didn't have 3 buckets of funding, one for multifamily projects, one for single family home repairs, and then another one to fund any other programs that may come up during the recovery process. And we wanted to share the reasoning for that, which is that HUD requires that we allocate the full grant amount to eligible activities in our action plan, but that we do have the ability to amend program funding amounts as needs, resources, and priorities change in implementation. We have also been asked if the city can consider allocating additional funding from other CDBG-DR programs. And this is a really challenging question in that there are trade-offs that need to be made given the enormous extent of the unmet need at 1.1 billion, but the program allocation amount and amounting to 210 million across these programs. The current housing allocation strategically addresses the overwhelming majority of the estimated need in that housing category while protecting the allocation critical to economic recovery and infrastructure unmet needs as well. You can see in this table that the 31 million allocated to the housing program addresses 92% of the unmet need as assessed in the action planning phase, while only 13% and 21% of the infrastructure and economic recovery need is able to be addressed with the allocations. Next slide, please. The next element mentioned is that the city is expanding the partnership with Archer. I'm glad Nikki's here because she and Sasha have been implementing this program, but I'll give the overview, and then if any questions, I'll turn it over to Sasha and Nikki. So what is Archer? The Asheville Regional Coalition for Home Repair. It's a collaborative of organizations that provide home repairs and modifications to residents in Buncombe and Madison County. Members include Asheville Area Habitat for Humanity, Poder Emma, Community Action Opportunities, Mountain Housing Opportunities, Community Housing Coalition, Asheville Buncombe Community Land Trust, and PRC applications. Weeks after Tropical Storm Helene, the city allocated 1.465 million from the 2016 bond for storm-related home repair. The city engaged Archer with an initial funding amount of 715,000, which helped leverage an additional $5 million from private and public sources. And Archer has completed 44 home repair projects in the city of Asheville, primarily in legacy neighborhoods. Next slide, please. 126 households in the city of Asheville remain in the Archer pipeline awaiting assistance, and Archer is currently prioritizing scope of work inspections of homes in anticipation of the release of additional funds. And in terms of what is next for the city and Archer, the city will amend its contract with Archer to allocate the remaining funds from the 2016 bond to the program. And council's original approval of this funding authorized the full expenditure, so no further action is required in order for the city to proceed at this time. Next slide, please. Finally, some updates on the multifamily construction program. Next slide, please. The goal is to provide gap funding for the construction and rehabilitation of affordable housing units. The program manual was published on December 30th. The first NOFO is scheduled to be released tomorrow, January 21st, to allocate an additional 10 million, an initial 10 million in funding, targeting shovel-ready projects. And the timeline seeks to align with the upcoming tax credit funding cycle. Next slide, please. The goals of the multifamily program reflect key input from the action planning process and are focused on creating sustainable and resilient housing following Tropical Storm Helene, including the creation of resilient mixed income housing to fund shovel-ready multifamily rental developments that feature substantial disaster resilient characteristics and operate as mixed income communities, targeting a mix of incomes below 80% AMI. Deep and long-term affordability. The program requires that 100% of units be restricted by low-income housing tax credits, with an average affordability at or below 60% AMI, maintained over a minimum 35-year deed restriction period. And strategic disaster recovery investment. By allocating 10 million in DR funds, the program aims to address the urgent housing needs within Asheville city limits and incorporate mitigation components to protect against future disaster events. Next slide, please. Here you can see the time.
Can I ask
Yes.
a question?
Yes,
Maybe
Ms.
go
May.
back 2 slides about the NOFO.
Sure. Yes, of course.
So 10 million to assess the multifamily pipeline. Can you explain what that means? Does that mean, depending on how many people apply, that's how we'll determine what is needed to build multifamily?
That's not quite what we're saying. We're trying to get a sense for what are the shovel-ready projects um, that are ready to go and essentially awaiting gap funding that would be realistic for CDBGDR to cover so that we can have a better understanding of what some of those trade-offs are as we're thinking about the single-family home repair need and the multifamily home repair need, but really thinking about what's needed now urgently and like what's ready to go.
I got you. And sorry for the interruption. Go right ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Yeah, perfect. Thank you. The tentative timeline for the multifamily construction program is indicated here, and I think we covered some of it, but I'll just go through them. In that the program manual was published on the 30th of December. We're sharing information with HCD today. The NOFO is scheduled to be released tomorrow, January 21st. We have a developer information session scheduled on January 30th. We plan to share updates with the Housing Recovery Board on February 4 on where things are at that time. NOFO responses will be due February 25th, and we hope to come back to HCD and then to Council in April with additional information and potentially requesting authorization to proceed. Next slide, please. We're back to the key takeaway slide. I think I'll just leave it there, but if any questions, we are here. Thank you for your time.
Shanika, any questions?
You kind of answered my question a little bit off at the top of your presentation. I wondered about the inactive applications. You mentioned that temporary housing is not a reason for the inactive status. I wondered if you had any data that give us more information on why they're inactive.
We're seeking further information about the inactive codes, essentially, that the state is potentially able to share with us. At this time, they've assured us that that's not the reason because no homes have been, no applicants have been gotten to the stage where they need to identify a place where they are relocating to. So far, none of the inactive applications are due to that. But we are seeking more information about that because currently we don't have that.
Okay. Any other questions? What do you need from us? This is just information sharing, correct?
That's right.
Okay. Okay. So does this mean that the request to move the 17 million is kind of on hold for now?
That's correct. We are seeking more data before we proceed with a substantial amendment like that.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure. Okay, well, thank you. Do you have anything else to add, Nikki or Ben? Well, thank you, Elma. This was really helpful. And good to see you too, James. And welcome back. And with that, we'll move to the next item on the agenda, which is public comment. Katie, do we have any speakers in the queue?
Yes, Madam Chair, we do. Just a moment, please.
Thank you.
Caller ending in 2132, your line is now open and you have 3 minutes.
Hey, everybody, this is David Greenson from GAP AVL, People's Place AVL. Appreciate the presentation today, very informative. Really appreciate the leadership the Legacy Neighborhood Coalition has taken on raising up this issue of displacement, and especially how Station closed today, saying that this is not just about legacy neighborhoods. It's really an issue we have to be concerned with for the whole city. So really appreciate them putting that on all of our radar screens. I wanted to also just comment on the CDBG DR update. Also really appreciate that staff is collecting more information. I do wonder if there, I know in the past, HCD used to get a regular report on all of the affordable housing that was in the pipeline, and I believe staff has been working on that, and I wondered if there was an update on when that information could be published, because I think it would be really beneficial to the conversation as we think about how much money needs to go into multifamily from the CDBG DR. It would be really useful to know, what other affordable housing is being built with other funding sources and so on. It just seems like it would give everybody a little bit of context. So I know that was something that was in the works, and I would love an update on that if there is anybody able to offer that. And thanks very much, everybody.
Okay, well, thank you. Katie?
That is all we have in the speaker queue.
Okay, well, thank you. Great meeting all. And with that, unless there are other questions, comments, or concerns, we are adjourned. Take care, everyone.